My name is Harold Bennett, and a few months ago, I lost everything a man can lose without dying. My house in Siesta Key wasn't just a roof over my head. It was the place where my wife and I built our life together, where my daughter took her first steps, where every wall carried the sound of laughter, arguments, prayers, and silence. Then the hurricane came. It started like they always do, with warnings on the news and neighbors boarding up windows. But no matter how many storms you've seen, nothing prepares you for the one that finally takes it all. I watched the sky turn the color of bruises, felt the pressure drop, and then the wind ripped through my neighborhood like an angry giant. The night was a blur of noise and fear. I remember clutching the old photo albums, the only thing I thought I could save, and stuffing them into a plastic bag. The roof tore away, glass shattered, and the water came pouring in. By morning, what was once my home was just a skeleton of wood and broken memories. I wasn't the only one. My neighbors stumbled through the wreckage, some barefoot, some bleeding, all of us carrying whatever we could. A woman down the street sobbed over a ruined crib. An old man just sat on his porch, or what was left of it, staring at the sea as if it had betrayed him. That's the thing about disasters. They don't just break houses. They break the illusion that tomorrow will look like today. Standing there in the ruins, I knew I had nowhere to sleep that night. No insurance check would come fast enough. No government aid would arrive before sundown. All I had was my truck, the clothes on my back, and the faint hope that family meant something. So I packed what little I could salvage, climbed into my old pickup, and turned north. Jacksonville was hours away, but that's where my daughter lived, and in my heart, I believed she would open her door without hesitation. Fathers convince themselves of these things, that no matter how much distance or silence has grown between you, blood will still count when it matters most. The road was long and heavy, littered with debris, traffic crawling as convoys of evacuees tried to find safety. I gripped the wheel and tried not to think about the cracks in my relationship with my daughter. I remembered her smile at 16 when she got her driver's license, the way she laughed at my stubbornness when I refused to buy a GPS, swearing I could still read a paper map. But I also remember the arguments, the college tuition I couldn't fully cover, the birthdays I missed while working overtime, the day she told me I never really listened to her. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had failed more times than I realized. But as mile after mile passed beneath my tires, I told myself none of that mattered now. Surely, when she saw me standing there with nowhere else to go, she'd put old wounds aside. By the time I reached Jacksonville, night had fallen. The streets glistened with rain, traffic lights casting reflections across the pavement. I slowed as I turned into her neighborhood, a quiet row of houses with trimmed lawns and warm lights glowing in the windows. It looked safe. It looked like everything I no longer had. I parked in front of her house and sat for a moment. Gathering myself, my hands trembled on the steering wheel. I told myself this was temporary, just until I got back on my feet. I told myself she'd be glad to see me. I told myself a lot of things. Then I stepped out, walked up the driveway, and raised my hand to knock. The knock echoed louder in my chest than it did on the wood. I stood there in the glow of the porch light, rain still dripping from my jacket, rehearsing the words I might say. It's just temporary. Or maybe I'll stay out of the way. I would have begged if I had to. Pride was already gone, washed away with the storm surge back in Siesta Key. The door opened, and there she was, my daughter. For a moment I thought I saw that little girl who used to run across the backyard with her hair flying behind her, calling, "Daddy, watch me!" But the woman standing in front of me had no smile, no warmth. Her arms folded tight across her chest, her eyes darting past me like I was a stranger selling magazines. "Dad," she said flatly. No hug, no invitation to come inside. Just my name, spoken like an inconvenience. I tried to smile, though my lips trembled. I lost everything, sweetheart. The hurricane took the house. I thought maybe I could stay here for a while, just until I figure things out." She shifted uncomfortably, biting her lip. And then, like a shadow stepping into the light, he appeared, my son-in-law. Taller than me, younger, his arms sliding around her shoulders as if to shield her from me. "What's going on?" he asked, though his eyes were already fixed on me with irritation. "It's my father," she murmured. He looked me up and down, his jaw tightening. "We need privacy right now. This isn't a good time." I blinked, unsure I heard him right. "Privacy? Son, I'm not asking for much. Just a couch? A floor, even? Just somewhere to rest while I—" "No," he cut me off, voice sharp, final. "My wife agrees. We want privacy. It's not comfortable having you here." I turned to her, desperate. "Is that true?" Her eyes dropped to the floor. She didn't answer. The silence was worse than shouting, worse than the storm. At least the hurricane had the decency to roar while it destroyed me. My daughter couldn't even look at me while she shut me out. I swallowed the lump in my throat and tried one last time. "I'm your father. I have nowhere else to go tonight. Not one place. Please." Her lips parted, but no words came. The man beside her, though, had plenty to say. "We've made our decision. Good night." And just like that, the door closed. The click of the lock felt louder than the wind that had torn my roof away. I stood there a long moment, staring at the door, the porch light casting my shadow back onto the driveway like it was mocking me. Then, finally, I turned and walked slowly toward my truck. The inside of the cab smelled like damp leather and gasoline. I sat behind the wheel, gripping it with both hands, but I didn't start the engine. Through the windshield, I could still see their silhouettes moving in the window, their comfortable house glowing warm against the dark. A house that wasn't mine, a family that didn't want me. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and felt the weight of 60-something years pressing down. My wife was gone. My home was gone, and now even my daughter had closed her heart to me. In that moment, with the storm still echoing in my ears and the taste of rejection burning in my mouth, one truth settled over me heavier than the rain. I had nowhere left to turn. Or so I thought. I sat in that truck longer than I cared to admit, staring at the raindrops sliding down the windshield like they were racing to see which one would hit bottom first. The engine was off, but the sound of the storm lingered in my chest, louder than the silence that came from the house behind me. That porch light still burned, though the door was locked tight. I imagined them inside, my daughter and her husband, going back to their dinner, maybe pouring themselves another glass of wine, relieved that the old man had been turned away. The thought gnawed at me. How could she, my little girl, look at me with those empty eyes? I leaned forward, pressing my forehead against the steering wheel, and for a moment I let myself break. No one was there to see. The tears came hot and fast, but I didn't wipe them. 60-something years of trying to be strong, and it ended with me crying in the cab of a truck parked outside the one place I thought would take me in. I thought about driving, just starting the engine and pointing north or west or anywhere the road stretched. But where would I go? Motels were full of evacuees, shelters even more crowded, and the truth was, I didn't have the money to wander. Everything I had, bank records, bills, the deed to a house that no longer existed, was back under the rubble of Siesta Key. I pulled my wallet from my pocket, stared at the cracked leather, and thumbed through the photographs tucked inside. One was of my wife on our wedding day. Another, my daughter at 7 years old, missing her front teeth, but grinning like sunshine. That little girl had believed in me. She used to run to the door when I came home from work, shouting, "Daddy's here." Now she couldn't even say, "Come in." That's when another face came to mind, a face I hadn't seen in decades. Charles Whitmore. Back in college, Charles wasn't the billionaire people know now. He was just another kid trying to make something of himself, a kid with more ideas than money and a hunger to prove everyone wrong. I was there when he failed his first business pitch, when professors told him he'd never make it. I was the one who sat across from him at the diner at 2 in the morning, telling him to keep going. I never gave him money, I didn't have any, but I gave him something else, belief. And Charles never forgot. I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the contacts, scrolling down past names I hadn't called in years. When I saw his, my chest tightened. What right did I have to call him now, after all this time? But what choice did I have? I tapped the number. The line rang once, twice. Then a familiar voice, deeper than I remembered, but unmistakable, filled my ear. "Harold? Is that really you?" I swallowed hard. "It's me, Charles." "My God, it's been years. How you doing, old friend?" The question broke me. I wanted to say fine. I wanted to pretend I hadn't hit rock bottom, but my voice betrayed me. "I'm not good, Charles. Not good at all. I lost my house in the hurricane. I lost everything." There was silence on the other end, but not the kind that judged, the kind that listened. "Where are you right now?" he asked. I hesitated. My eyes flicked to the house, glowing warm just a few feet away. I'm outside my daughter's place in Jacksonville. I don't know where else to go." "Stay there," he said without missing a beat. "Don't move. I'm on my way." I lowered the phone slowly, staring at it like it had just saved my life. For the first time since the storm, I felt the faintest flicker of relief. But as I glanced back toward the house, I noticed the curtains shift. A shadow moved. They were watching me sit broken in the cab of my truck, watching me call for help somewhere else. And for reasons I couldn't explain, that hurt even worse. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but I stayed in my truck, hands resting on the wheel, listening to the hum of the street lamps. Charles' words still echoed in my ear. "Don't move. I'm on my way." For the first time that night, I wasn't completely alone, but that didn't erase the sting of what had just happened. Through the windshield, I could see the warm glow of the living room. The curtains weren't pulled tight, and every now and then, a sliver of movement crossed the window. I shouldn't have looked, but I couldn't stop myself. It was like watching a play where the actors had forgotten you were still in the audience. At first it was quiet, just shapes moving past the glass. Then the voices started. Muffled at first, then sharper, the kind of tones you can't mistake. My daughter's voice cut through. "We can't keep this up forever." Then his, low and irritated. "I told you, I'll handle it. Stop panicking." I leaned forward, straining to hear. She snapped back. "Handle it? We're already 3 months behind. Do you think they won't notice? Do you think the landlord's just gonna forget?" The word landlord hit me like a nail. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. He paced, at least that's what it looked like from the moving shadow. "I'll get the money. I've got something lined up. But I can't deal with your father showing up on top of all this. He'll start asking questions. He'll see the bills. It's better this way." There it was. The truth that had been sitting under the surface like rot in the wood.
They weren't just pushing me away out of coldness. They were hiding something. I thought back to what I'd noticed earlier, the envelopes stacked on the counter, unopened, the way my daughter avoided my eyes when I asked if everything was okay, the sharpness in his tone when he told me to leave. Behind that door, they weren't just rejecting me, they were drowning. And somehow letting me in would have meant letting me see how deep the water really was. I sat back, my chest heavy, torn between anger and heartbreak. A part of me wanted to storm back up those steps, pound on the door, and remind them who I was, her father, not some beggar. But I didn't. I couldn't. My dignity was hanging by a thread, and another rejection would have snapped it clean in two. Instead, I closed my eyes and tried to focus on the sound of the rain against the roof of the truck. I told myself to breathe, to wait. Charles was coming. And if there was one man I trusted in this world, it was him. But the longer I sat there, the more another thought gnawed at me. What if Charles saw me like they did? What if he came, took one look at me sitting in this broken-down truck, and realized I was nothing but a burden? I shook the thought off, gripping the steering wheel again. Charles wasn't like that. He remembered who I was when we were young. He remembered the nights we dreamed about the future when neither of us had two nickels to rub together. He remembered the way I pushed him forward when everyone else told him he was wasting his time. Still, doubt crept in. Maybe he had changed. Maybe success had turned him into the kind of man who closed doors instead of opening them. The window of the house lit up brighter as the kitchen light came on. I caught another glimpse of them, her shoulders slumped, his hands slicing through the air as he argued. It was strange watching my own daughter through glass like she belonged to another life entirely. I pressed my palms against my knees and whispered to myself, "Just hold on. Just hold on until Charles gets here." And as I said it, I saw headlights turn the corner. The headlights washed over my truck like a wave of daylight in the dark street. A black sedan slowed, its tires hissing against the wet pavement, and then stopped right beside me. For a second, I just stared, unsure if it was really him. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Charles Whitmore. He wasn't the boy I remembered from our college days, with his two big glasses and restless energy. He stood straighter now, with the calm presence of a man who had climbed mountains few even dared to approach. His suit was simple but perfect, his hair silver at the temples, his face marked with the kind of lines you earn by fighting battles and winning them. "Harold," he said, and in that one word I heard every memory come rushing back. The long nights of studying, the failures, the half-baked dreams we used to cook up over cheap coffee. He stepped forward and pulled me into a hug so firm, so unashamed, that I nearly lost my breath. "My God," he continued, holding me at arm's length. "Look at you. It's been too long." I swallowed hard. "Charles, I didn't know who else to call." "You don't need anyone else," he said, as if it were the most obvious truth in the world. "You've got me?" I blinked against the sting in my eyes, embarrassed at how quickly his words broke through the walls I'd been holding up all night. Behind us, the front door creaked open. A rectangle of light spilled across the driveway, and there they were, my daughter and her husband, framed in the doorway. She squinted, her face pale with confusion. "Dad? Who is that?" Charles turned, his presence commanding, even from a distance. "Charles Whitmore," he said simply. I watched the recognition hit her like a physical blow. Her mouth opened, then shut again, as if the name had robbed her of words. The Jean stiffened, his face draining of color. "You," my daughter stammered, "you own—" Charles cut her off, gently but firmly. "Yes, I own many things in Jacksonville." His eyes flicked to the house behind them, lingering just long enough for the implication to settle. The silence that followed was heavier than the storm had ever been. My son-in-law shifted uncomfortably, his bravado faltering. He tried to recover, tried to sound casual.
We didn't know you knew him." Charles placed a hand on my shoulder, steady and unshakable. "Not only do I know him, I owe him. If not for Harold Bennett, I might not be standing here today." I lowered my gaze, embarrassed by the weight of his words. But Charles wasn't finished. He raised his voice just enough to carry across the driveway. "So when he calls me, I come. That's the kind of man he is. That's the kind of friend he is." My daughter's eyes darted between us, her expression a mix of shock and shame. The Jean Rose stiffened, his face dangling of color. For the first time that night, I wasn't the one left standing in silence. Charles squeezed my shoulder once more, then leaned closer. "Come with me. You're not spending another minute alone in that truck." I nodded, my throat too tight to answer. Together we turned from the glow of the porch and walked toward his car. But even as I moved, I felt their eyes on me, my daughter pale as a ghost, my son-in-law frozen in place, as if they had just realized the door they slammed shut might never open again. Charles insisted I sit back down in the truck before the drizzle turned into another downpour. He slid into the passenger seat like he belonged there, shutting the door with a solid thud that made the cab feel smaller, safer somehow. For a moment, we just sat there in silence. I stared at the cracked dashboard, embarrassed to let him see how far I'd fallen. He, on the other hand, studied me the way a man does when he's searching for someone he once knew. "Tell me what happened," he finally said. His voice wasn't demanding. It was steady, the kind of voice that left you no choice but to answer. So I told him. I told him about Siesta Key, about the roof ripping away in the wind, about watching the water pour through the windows like a thief in the night. I told him how I packed what I could, how I drove here believing family would mean something. I didn't mention the rejection at first. Shame stuck in my throat like a stone. But Charles had always been sharper than most. "And when you knocked on that door?" he asked quietly. The words cracked out of me before I could stop them. They turned me away. My own daughter said they wanted privacy, that I wasn't welcome. I hadn't meant to look, but when I did, the porch light still framed them in the doorway. My daughter and her husband stood there, frozen silhouettes against the glow. They could hear every word. Charles followed my gaze, then turned back to me. His jaw tightened, but his tone stayed calm. "I see," he said simply. The shame burned hotter. I clenched the steering wheel and muttered, "Maybe I deserved it. I wasn't the perfect father. I missed birthdays, worked too many late nights. Maybe she has her reasons." Charles shook his head firmly. "No reason justifies this. A man can make mistakes, Harold, but when the storm takes everything and he shows up at your door, you open it. That's what family means." The conviction in his voice left no room for argument. For the first time all night, I didn't feel like I had to defend myself. I leaned back, exhausted. I thought I'd reached the bottom when the hurricane destroyed my home. Turns out the real bottom was here, in front of this house. Charles's eyes softened, but his tone stayed calm. "Then let's make sure this isn't the bottom, old friend. Let's make sure it's the turning point." Outside, the silence stretched. My daughter whispered something to her husband, but the wind carried it away. I saw his shoulders stiffen, his hands slicing through the air as he argued back. The cracks between them were widening, and now, with Charles here, there was nowhere to hide. Charles noticed too. He leaned closer, his voice low enough only I could hear. "There's more going on in that house than you know. I can see it from here. The way he stands, the way she shrinks back. Something's wrong." I thought of the voices I'd overheard earlier.
The late bills, the landlord, the word rent. My chest tightened. Charles didn't press further, not yet. He simply placed a hand on my arm, steady and grounding. Whatever they're hiding, it's not your burden anymore. You've carried enough. I nodded, though part of me still ached. I hadn't wanted revenge when I knocked on that door. I'd only wanted refuge. But as I sat there beside Charles, watching the uneasy shadows shift in the doorway, I realized something had shifted. The balance of power no longer belonged to them. And for the first time that night, I felt a spark of dignity returning, flickering small but stubborn against the darkness.
Charles opened the door of the truck and stepped out into the damp night air. For a second, I wanted to tell him to stay, to keep this between the two of us. But something in his posture told me it was too late for that. He wasn't just here for me. He was here to set things right. I followed slowly, my boots splashing in the shallow puddles on the driveway. The porch light threw long shadows across the yard. My daughter and her husband stood in the doorway, stiff as statues, their faces tight with unease. Charles's presence carried weight. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. He simply stood there, his hands tucked into the pockets of his coat, his eyes steady. "Evening," he said calmly. My son-in-law cleared his throat, trying to sound in control. "Look, this isn't really a good time. We've already told him," he gestured at me, his words dripping with irritation. "He can't stay here. We need our space." Charles tilted his head slightly, as if studying a child who hadn't learned respect. "Is that so?" "Yes," my son-in-law pressed on. "He showed up unannounced, expecting us to just take him in. That's not how things work." And then he said the words that lit the fuse. "We told him we don't want him here." Charles's expression didn't change, but his voice sharpened. "So that's how you treat him. Nobody shuts the door on Harold Bennett." The sentence landed heavier than any punch. My daughter flinched. My son-in-law froze. The night itself seemed to hold its breath. Charles took a step closer, his gaze locked on them. "This man stood by me when I had nothing. No money, no influence, no name. Everyone else walked away, but not Harold. He believed in me before the world did. And now, when the storm has taken everything from him, you think you can turn him out like a stray dog?" My throat tightened. I wanted to stop him, to tell him it was enough, but I couldn't move. My daughter's voice cracked, barely above a whisper. We didn't mean—" Charles raised a hand, silencing her gently but firmly. "You did. You meant every word when you locked that door, and now you'll live with the weight of it." The general bristled, his pride pushing him into dangerous territory. "You don't understand our situation. This house, these bills, it's complicated." A flicker of a smile touched Charles's lips, humorless and cold. "Oh, you understand more than you realize. In fact, let me clear something up for you. This house you're so desperate to hold on to?" He paused, his eyes narrowing. "It belongs to me." The color drained from both their faces. My daughter's hand flew to her mouth. My son-in-law stammered, That can't—" "I own this property," Charles said, his tone final, unarguable, "through my company. And I also know that you're months behind on rent. I was planning to have my office handle it quietly, but after tonight, no. Tonight I handle it myself." The silence that followed was brutal. The only sound was the drip of rain from the eaves and the pounding of my own heart. My son-in-law's bravado crumbled. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "We can pay—" "You will pay nothing tonight. Not with money, anyway. Tonight, you'll pay with the knowledge that the roof over your head exists because of the very man you just turned away."
Your father, the man you shamed. My daughter's eyes brimmed with tears. She whispered, "Dad, But I couldn't answer. Not yet. Charles stepped back, his voice steady but fierce. Remember this moment, because you'll never forget the night Harold Bennett stood in the rain and the world saw who you really are. And with that, the street fell silent, their shame louder than any storm I'd ever known.
The street was quiet again after Charles's words, but the silence was heavier than thunder. My daughter stood frozen in the doorway, her husband beside her like a man who had just seen the ground pulled out from under his feet. I felt the weight of their eyes on me, but for once, I didn't shrink beneath it. Charles touched my shoulder. "Come on, Harold. You're done standing in the rain." I nodded, climbing into his car while he circled to the driver's side. As the door shut, the warmth inside wrapped around me like a blanket I hadn't realized I needed. For the first time in days, I wasn't thinking about where I'd sleep or how long I could last. I was thinking about tomorrow. Through the window, I saw my daughter step forward, her hand gripping the frame of the door as if she needed it to keep from falling. "Dad," she called softly. Her voice trembled, raw. "Please, wait." I froze. Part of me wanted to open the door, to rush to her like I used to when she scraped her knees as a child. But another part of me remembered the click of that lock, the way she couldn't even look me in the eye when I begged. Charles rested his hand on the steering wheel, but didn't start the engine. "Your choice," he said gently. I turned to face her. She took a step into the rain, her eyes shining. "I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I didn't know how to handle everything. The bills, the debt, him." She glanced at her husband, whose jaw tightened, but who said nothing. The apology twisted something inside me, but it didn't erase the hurt. I rolled the window down just enough. When the storm took my house, I thought nothing could hurt worse. But when you shut that door, it broke something deeper. You need to understand that. Tears slid down her cheeks. "I do." I wanted to believe her. God help me, I wanted to. But I also knew some wounds don't close overnight. "Maybe one day," I said quietly. "But not tonight." Her sob carried into the rain, but I lifted the window, turning back toward Charles. He gave me a nod, not of approval, but of understanding. The drive away from that street felt unreal. The houses blurred past, each one glowing warm against the night, but none of them mine. Yet I didn't feel homeless anymore. I felt untethered, yes, but also unburdened. Charles broke the silence. "You'll stay with me for as long as you need, and when you're ready, we'll rebuild. I've got the means, and you still got fight left in you. Don't think I don't see it." I let out a shaky laugh. "You always did believe in me more than I believed in myself." He glanced at me with a faint smile. "Because you were the one who taught me how. Don't forget that." We drove on, past the city lights, toward a future I hadn't imagined when the storm first hit. For the first time since losing everything, I felt the weight lift just enough for hope to slip in. Later, lying in the guest room of Charles's house, I thought back to Siesta Key, to the ruins of the home where I'd spent most of my life. I thought of my wife's laughter echoing through the halls, of my daughter's first steps across the living room. I mourned it all, but I didn't drown in it, because now I knew walls and roofs don't define a man. The people who stand by him when the world crumbles, that's what matters. And though I'd lost a house, I'd found something stronger, the truth of who was truly with me when the storm came.